In this section, we're going to begin the actual creation of a worksheet. We're going to enter data, probably the most important thing you need to do to build a worksheet. We want to talk about how to put in text, enter formulas. We'll show you a basic function or two. We'll also show you some of the tools that can help you get your work done faster than if you had used a menu. Let's return to our home position. Remember I'd said earlier, Control Home will always return the active cell to the A1 location. Control Home. Imagine that we are going to create a small worksheet, perhaps keep track of data over a 6-month period, just sales, expenses, and profits. We probably don't want information in cell A1 for the moment. We may change our minds later. Let's suppose that we want to begin by putting information in cell A2. We can certainly use the mouse and click on cell A2, or we could have used the arrow key on our keyboard to make A2 be the active cell. We want to enter some text, for example, the word sales. Just begin typing. As you type, sometimes you do make a mistake. I hit the letter K. If you sense the mistake immediately, you can hit the backspace key and the last character you type will disappear. And then let's type LES. Maybe I type LED by mistake. I hit enter. Sometimes the mistake you make, you don't see right away. In this case, if the entry is short, you could simply return to that cell and retype it. You don't need to erase it. SALES. Notice that when you hit enter, as I'm about to do here, the active cell moves downward. Now that is a default setting in Excel. You may change it if you wish to, and I'll show you where to do that. The Tools command in the menu has an option called Options. There are many, many things you could do here. The Edit tab does have an option called Move Selection After Enter. Now, you might not want to change this at all. What it means is that if you type an entry and hit enter, the active cell will move down to the next one. And you do, if necessary, have the ability to change this to be right, up, or left. Now, I could see perhaps using right if the kind of data that you typically enter needs to be in adjacent cells to the right. It would be more unusual to use up or left. You do have the ability also to not have this work at all. For example, if I turn this off and then click OK, if I make another entry in cell A3, what happens when I hit enter? For example, the word expenses. I will hit enter. The active cell stays there. It's up to you to decide what's more convenient. I think what I'll do here is leave this in the default setting, Tools, Options, the Edit tab is the one that's active, Move Selection After Enter, and I'll leave this at down. And I'm doing this because this is the more common selection that you see in Excel setups. So from now on, when we make an entry, the active cell will move downward. We also have the ability, when typing an entry, to complete it by hitting one of the arrow keys. If, for example, if I'm about to type the word profits here, and I then wanted to move to the cell to the immediate right, B4, I could type the word profits and hit the right arrow key. That completes the entry and moves the active cell rightward. Notice that the information that's entered in cells A2, A3, and A4 is automatically aligned on the left-hand side of the cell. That's because in most situations where you are entering text, in this case it will help us identify the rows, you probably do want this on the left-hand side. However, in the toolbar you'll notice that there are 3 tools here, left, align left, center, and align right. And depending upon circumstances, you may want to align information in different portions of the cell. For the moment, we will leave these aligned left. The next thing we'd like to do is to put in some text in row 1. And what we're going to do here in cells B1 through G1 is put in the names of the months. This particular worksheet is going to contain information about the first 6 months of a year. We could certainly type January, or we could type JAN. And the interesting thing here is that no matter which of these we type, and let's suppose, for example, I'll type the entire month, and I'll just hit enter. Excel recognizes the spelling of a month. It also recognizes the three-letter abbreviation in the following way. Built into Excel is the recognition that certain features, certain cell entries, like months, days of the week, dates, are frequently used in series. If we're going to be using the word January, it would be nice to use the word February, March, April, etc. to the right. And we could certainly type those. That's not a huge effort. But since Excel does recognize the word January or the abbreviation JAN, if we have a month in a cell, if we were to point to this cell and look in the lower right-hand corner, do notice when you move the mouse around the screen that it will change its shape. If you point to the edge of the active cell, it becomes an arrow. If you point inside the active cell or inside any cell, the mouse assumes a three-dimensional plus look to it. If you point to the lower right-hand corner of the active cell on that little square that's referred to as the handle, the mouse pointer turns into a two-dimensional plus, say crosshairs. If you click and drag either rightward, as we're doing here, notice how Excel anticipates what's going to go in the cell. It even tells you February, March, April, May, June. And we could drag this off to the right many, many cells. And if, for example, we were reaching December, then the next month would be January. If I release the mouse at this point, we'll see the entries for all of those months. We don't want to drag down here, but if we had done that, and we could do that from any of these, if we were to drag downward, we would see months in ascending order in that direction. Now, a little bit later, we'll talk about other characteristics here. But here's another problem, not really a problem, but situation. We don't want the words April, May, or June here. How do we get rid of them? Well, we could type in numbers because we are eventually going to do that anyway. We could also simply delete these cells by hitting the delete key on the keyboard. Information is gone. So we took advantage here of a feature called autofill to make our data entry simpler. Because this information is text, it's automatically aligned on the left-hand side of the cells. This may not be what you want, and since we are going to be putting in numbers in these cells, and they're going to be aligned automatically to the right, we might want to think about how this information appears. There is a word that we use consistently in Windows software. It's called select. Sometimes we refer to it as a selection. And whether it's in Word or PowerPoint or Access or in Excel, the word select usually means to highlight. In this example that we're about to show you, we're going to highlight some cells before we do something to them. And the general rule, it's almost a motto, is select, then do. Whether we're going to be using the menu or the toolbar, we need to select cells first before we can do something to them. In this example, we want to select the cells B1, C1, D1, E1, F1, G1. We don't want to select them one at a time. We want to select them all at once. We must be sensitive to the way the mouse looks. If we point in the lower right-hand corner and drag, we'll simply be repeating the action of putting in additional months. If we point to the arrow here and drag, we will be moving data. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that the mouse pointer looks like a three-dimensional plus. And if we click, and of course it will look that way if we point anywhere inside the cell. If we click with the left mouse button and drag to the right, we are selecting additional cells. If we then use the formatting toolbar or if we use commands and make changes, the changes will occur on all 6 of these cells. For example, suppose we want to align the information on the right-hand side of each cell. This particular button says align right, and if we push it, and if we click on that button, the information is aligned on the right-hand side. If we click here, we will center the information. Possibly that's a choice here too. I'm going to use align right. If we wanted this information to appear more prominently, we could use the button called bold, which makes the letters thicker looking, or italic. And we can use those in combination also if we wish. I'm going to leave that at bold, but not italic. Notice how the buttons appear to have that look of being pressed in. The B is active here. And at any given time in a worksheet, if you click on a cell, you will notice that the B, if you haven't pointed to it, appears to be neutral or not in use. Click on a cell where bold is in effect. The letter B now appears to be pressed in. That's just a reminder that the cell has been given that format of being bold. Now, at any given time as you create a worksheet, you may want to have the information appear larger. We certainly could change the font size, but another way to look at our worksheet differently is to point into the standard toolbar, and you'll notice you'll see probably 100% here. This is called the zoom control box, and if you click on the down arrow, you'll see some other choices. And this is sort of like looking through the microscope or holding up the binoculars. If we choose 200, for example, watch the screen. We are seeing our information much, much larger, although we're not seeing as much of it. Sometimes you need to do this if you're demonstrating a point to others who want to look at your screen. You want things to appear larger. At other times, you want to zoom back so you can see more of a worksheet. If we go back to 75%, even though we have a lot of empty space here, perhaps our worksheet is going to grow, or perhaps it has, and we have information out in these columns. Sometimes we want to zoom out to see more information. You can, by the way, click in this box and type in any number you wish from 10 to 400. So if, for example, if I were to type 90 and hit enter, the screen is now at a 90% zoom. At different times, we will be using this many times just for screen clarity. If you are trying to make a point and demonstrate to others, you may want to zoom in by going upward. I'll return this to 100, which is the common choice that we typically see. A little bit later, we'll talk about what selection means there also. Our worksheet at the moment simply has text information. In column A, we put in 3 words in A2, A3, A4, and in row 1, B1 through G1, we have the names of the months. What we're now going to do is talk about how we put in numeric information. What we're going to do is just create some numbers here, sales for January, February, March, April, May, June. As you type a number, notice how it appears in the cell. I'm going to put in the number 120. It appears